The metal doors of the Xenofauna observation wing slid open with a soft hiss. Dae-hyun Park stepped through, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He barely took 3 steps before 2 security officers blocked his path. "Stop right there, human," said Velthar, the tall reptilian officer. His golden eyes narrowed as he looked Dae-hyun up and down. "What happened to you?" Dae-hyun glanced at his arms. Long red scratches covered his skin from wrists to shoulders. More marks decorated his neck, and one crossed his left cheek. Some were still bleeding through the thin dermal patches he had slapped on in a hurry. "I'm fine," Dae-hyun said quietly. He tried to step around the officers, but Crix, the insectoid security guard, moved to block him again. Her antenna twitched with concern. "You don't look fine," Crix said, her mandibles clicking. "You look like you fought something with claws." "Big claws." Dae-hyun sighed and rubbed his tired eyes. "I didn't fight anything. Everything is under control." "Under control?" Velthar's voice rose. "The only creatures in that wing with claws like that are the Vrakith cubs. Did they attack you? Is there a containment breach?" Other people in the corridor stopped to stare. A group of blue-skinned Andorians whispered to each other. A floating jellyfish creature from the water levels drifted closer, its body pulsing with curious colors. "No breach," Dae-hyun said firmly. "The cubs are secure in their enclosure. Nobody is in danger. Then explain the scratches," Velthar demanded. He pulled out a scanner and began documenting the injuries for his report. "These are fresh, deep. Some need proper medical attention." Dae-hyun looked down at the scratches again. They did hurt. Quite a bit, actually. But he had experienced worse over the past 3 weeks. He thought about Razor's worried chirp when one scratch went deeper than intended. He remembered Shard's immediate retreat, ears flat with guilt. He recalled Echo's gentle head bump against his knee, her way of saying sorry. "The cubs were practicing," Dae-hyun said simply. Crix and Velthar exchanged confused looks. "Practicing what exactly?" Crix asked. "Hunting techniques. Social bonding behaviors. Things young Vrakith do with their family." Velthar's scales rippled with disbelief. "You let 3 juvenile apex predators practice hunting on you? Are you insane?" "I'm a xenobiologist," Dae-hyun replied. "It's my job to understand alien species. Understanding them doesn't mean becoming their prey." Velthar grabbed Dae-hyun's arm, not roughly but firmly. "You're coming with us. We need a full incident report. And you need medical treatment." Dae-hyun didn't resist as they guided him toward the security office. Station Kepler 7 was massive, home to over 50 different species. The corridors were wide enough for the largest beings, with gravity adjustments every few sections. They passed a group of small, furry Paxians, playing some kind of game with glowing orbs. A huge rock-like granite stood against the wall. Either sleeping or meditating, it was hard to tell with their species. The security office was a standard gray room with screens covering the walls. Commander Hyuk-nam was reviewing something on his tablet when they entered. He looked up, saw Dae-hyun's condition, and immediately stood. "Park, what the hell?" Hyuk was human too, which made his concern more personal. "Sit down. Crix, call Medical Officer Choi." "Already on her way," Crix replied. Hyuk pulled out a chair and Dae-hyun sat, suddenly feeling how exhausted he really was. He hadn't slept much in 3 weeks, spending every free moment with the cubs. "Talk," Hyuk said, crossing his arms. "And start from the beginning." Before Dae-hyun could answer, the door opened again. Ji-won Choi rushed in carrying a medical kit. Her eyes widened when she saw Dae-hyun. "Again?" she said, kneeling beside him. "This is the 3rd time this week. You knew about this?" Hyuk's voice was sharp. Ji-won pulled out antiseptic and began cleaning the wounds. "He comes to medical every few days. I thought he was working with some of the safer specimens." "Dae-hyun, you told me these were from equipment accidents." "I never said that." Dae-hyun winced as she applied medicine to a particularly deep scratch. "You assumed. Because normal people get scratched by equipment, not by the most dangerous predators on the station." Jiwon's hands were gentle despite her angry words. The Vracath killed 2 handlers on their colony ship before it was destroyed. Even as babies, they're deadly. They're not babies anymore, Daehyun said. They're juveniles. Old enough to learn. Young enough to change. Velthar pulled up footage on one of the screens. It showed the Vracath enclosure from yesterday. 3 creatures, each about the size of an earth lion, paced behind reinforced barriers. Their bodies were covered in dark purple fur with silver stripes. They had 6 legs, powerful shoulders, and heads that looked like a cross between a wolf and a dragon. Their claws were as long as human fingers. The footage showed the cubs attacking the food delivery system, snarling and slashing at the automated feeders. They looked vicious and wild. These are the creatures you're bonding with? Hyuk asked. Daehyun watched the screen. That footage is 2 weeks old. Before I started working with them. Show me current footage then, Hyuk said. Velthar switched to the live feed. The change was dramatic. The 3 cubs were curled together in a corner, sleeping peacefully. Their breathing was slow and calm. One of them, the smallest, had her paw draped over her brother's back. They looked different, Crix observed. Less aggressive. They were traumatized, Daehyun explained while Jiwon wrapped bandages around his arms. Their parents died in the colony ship disaster. They watched it happen. For weeks, they were alone in the dark while the ship drifted. By the time the rescue team found them, they trusted no one. So you decided to let them use you as a scratching post? Hyuk asked. I decided to help them heal, Daehyun corrected. In Vracath culture, parents teach hunting through play practice. The cubs grab and scratch, learning control and precision. It's how they bond with family. The cubs needed that interaction. They needed someone to teach them. It was safe to be close to others again. Jiwon finished bandaging and stood up. His vitals are stable. The wounds will heal in a few days. But, Daehyun, this is dangerous. One mistake, and they could kill you. They won't, Daehyun said with certainty. They're careful with me now. These scratches are from controlled practice, not attacks. A new voice spoke from the doorway. This is absolutely unacceptable. Everyone turned. A tall, muscular alien with gray skin and red eyes stood there. Thorgul was a Korthan, a species known for military strength and strict discipline. He served on the station council. Counselor Thorgul, Hyuk said. This is a security matter. This is a station safety matter, Thorgul interrupted. I've been reviewing reports about the Vracath cubs. 3 weeks ago, they were considered too dangerous for standard care. Now I learn a human scientist has been conducting unauthorized interaction experiments. My experiments are authorized, Daehyun said. I have clearance from the xenobiology department. Clearance to study them, not to play family with apex predators, Thorgul said coldly. He looked at Hyuk. I'm calling an emergency council meeting. Those creatures need to be transferred to a maximum security facility before someone dies. They're not creatures. Daehyun stood up too quickly, making his head spin. They're children, orphaned children who need help, not imprisonment. They're weapons, Thorgul said. The room fell silent. Daehyun felt his heart pounding. 3 weeks of work, of building trust, of slowly teaching the cubs that the world could be kind again. All of it might be erased. How long do I have? Daehyun asked. Hyuk looked uncomfortable. The council meets in 2 days. If they vote for transfer, you'll have maybe 48 hours. Daehyun met Thorgul's cold stare. Then I have 48 hours to prove you wrong. You can't prove anything, Thorgul said. Vracath are what they are. Dangerous, uncontrollable. It's in their nature. Nature can be taught, Daehyun said. And these cubs are proof. Thorgul smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Then, demonstrate it. Show the council these cubs are safe. But when you fail, and you will fail, those creatures will spend the rest of their lives in isolation cells. Alone. Just as dangerous beings should be. He turned and left. Ji-won put her hand on Dae-hyun's shoulder. Can you really prove it? In 2 days? Dae-hyun looked at the screen showing the sleeping cubs. Echo's ear twitched in her sleep. A small, peaceful movement. I have to try, he said. They deserve someone who won't give up on them. Hyuk sighed. Then you better get started. And Dae-hyun? Try not to collect any more scratches. It's not helping your case. Dae-hyun managed a tired smile. No promises, Commander. The cubs still need their practice. Dae-hyun sat in the observation room, watching old security footage on his personal tablet. Ji-won sat beside him with her own screen, reviewing his medical records from the past 3 weeks. Commander Hyuk stood behind them both, arms crossed, studying everything carefully. I need to understand, Hyuk said. Show me how this started. Dae-hyun scrolled back to the first day. 3 weeks ago. The footage showed him standing outside the Vrakath enclosure for the first time. The cubs were much thinner then, their fur patchy and dull. They huddled in the far corner, away from the transparent barrier. The rescue team brought them here 4 weeks before I arrived, Dae-hyun explained. 5 different xenobiologists tried to assess them. All 5 quit. Within days. On the screen, past Dae-hyun approached the barrier. The largest cub, Razor, immediately rushed forward, slamming against the transparent wall with a snarl that showed all his teeth. The barrier held, but the impact made the camera shake. They attacked everyone who came close, Ji-won said, reading from her file. 3 people were hospitalized with panic attacks. The night staff refused to enter that wing, alone. Because everyone treated them like monsters, Dae-hyun said. Look at the previous handlers. He showed another video. A Saurian handler used a long pole to push food through a slot. He moved quickly, nervously, keeping maximum distance. The cubs didn't even approach the food until hours after he left. They were starving themselves, Dae-hyun said. Not because they weren't hungry, but because they didn't trust anything offered by strangers. So what did you do differently? Hyuk asked. Dae-hyun switched to his own first-day footage. The timestamp showed he entered at 0800 hours. He walked calmly to the enclosure, carrying a simple folding chair and a lunchbox. He sat down about 10 feet from the barrier. The cubs watched him with suspicious eyes. Razor positioned himself in front of his siblings, protective and tense. Shard, the middle cub, showed his teeth in warning. Echo, the smallest, peeked out from behind her brothers. Past Dae-hyun opened his lunchbox and pulled out a sandwich. He began eating, completely ignoring the cubs. He chewed slowly, casually, as if he was alone in his own kitchen. You just ate lunch? Hyuk sounded confused. For 4 hours, Dae-hyun said. I ate, then read a book, then did some work on my tablet. I acted like they weren't even there. Why? Because every other person who came here wanted something from them. Wanted to study them, measure them, assess their threat level. I wanted to show them I wasn't a threat myself. Dae-hyun fast-forwarded through the footage. I came back at 1,400 hours. Sat for 4 more hours. Did the same thing. The footage showed him returning again and again, day after day. Always calm. Always at ease. Sometimes he brought different food. Sometimes he brought nothing but a book. He never tried to touch the barrier. Never made sudden moves. Never even looked directly at the cubs for long. On day 3, something changed, Dae-hyun said. The video showed him eating an apple. Echo had moved closer, no longer hiding behind her brothers. Her nose twitched, following the scent of the fruit. When Dae-hyun took a bite, her ears perked forward with interest. She was curious, Ji-won observed. She was brave, Dae-hyun corrected. The smallest, the weakest, but the first to take a risk. Day 4 footage showed even more progress. All 3 cubs now watched him openly. Razor still maintained his protective stance, But he was no longer snarling. Shard had started grooming Echo while keeping one eye on Daehyun. They were beginning to accept your presence, Hyuk said. Beginning to see me as part of their environment, Daehyun agreed. Not a threat, not food. Just there. Then came day 5. Daehyun remembered this moment clearly, even without the footage. He had brought his lunch as usual, a sandwich, some dried fruit, and a protein bar. He was eating the protein bar when Echo stood up. On screen, the small cub walked slowly toward the barrier. Razor chirped in warning, but Echo ignored him. She came right up to the transparent wall, directly in front of Daehyun. Past Daehyun stopped eating. He stayed very still, the protein bar in his hand. Echo sat down. She made a small sound, something between a chirp and a whine. Her eyes were fixed on the food. Slowly, carefully, Daehyun broke off a piece of the protein bar. The enclosure had a small, secure feeding slot designed for mechanical use. It required a code to open. Daehyun entered the code, and the slot opened just wide enough for his hand. He placed the piece of protein bar in the slot and withdrew his hand. The slot remained open. Echo stared at the food. She looked at Daehyun, back to the food. Then, moving faster than the camera could properly track, she snatched the food and retreated to her brothers. First successful hand feeding. Ji-won read from the notes. The turning point. She trusted me enough to take food directly from my hand zone, Daehyun said. After that, progress accelerated. The next videos showed the relationship developing. By day 7, all 3 cubs took food from the slot. By day 10, they approached the barrier whenever Daehyun arrived. By day 12, they made happy chirping sounds when they saw him. This is when you requested access permission for direct contact, Hyuk said, checking the official logs. Yes, Daehyun said. And that's when I learned about Vracath family bonding. He pulled up his research files. Diagrams of Vracath social structures. Notes from the few xenobiologists who had studied the species before the plague. Videos from the destroyed colony ship's archives. Vracath parents teach their cubs through play practice, Daehyun explained. The cubs stalk, pounce, and bite. But they learn control through repetition. Parents let cubs practice on them, correcting technique and teaching boundaries. They practice hunting on their own parents? Ji-won looked disturbed. It's educational play, not actual hunting, Daehyun said. Like human children playing rough with their fathers. The cubs need this interaction to develop properly. Without it, they become unstable and aggressive. That's why these 3 were so violent when they arrived, Hyuk realized. They hadn't had proper social development. Exactly, Daehyun said. They were trapped in permanent fear mode, unable to process their trauma, because they had no one to teach them how. He showed the footage from his first direct contact. Day 14. He had entered the enclosure wearing protective gear, though he suspected it wouldn't help much if things went wrong. The cubs had backed away when the door opened, uncertain about this change in routine. Daehyun sat down on the floor, making himself small and non-threatening. Come on, he had said softly in the recording. I'm right here, same as always. Minutes passed. Then Echo, brave Echo, approached first again. She sniffed his boots, his knees, worked her way up to his chest. Her nose was cold and wet against his neck. Then she opened her mouth and gently closed her teeth on his shoulder. Watching the footage now, Ji-won flinched. She's biting you. She's testing me, Daehyun said. Seeing if I'll react with fear or aggression. If I do either, I fail the test. I become a threat or prey. On screen, past Daehyun remained absolutely still. Echo held the bite for a few seconds, then released. She stepped back and made a clicking sound, her version of approval. Then Razor approached. Bigger and more powerful. He didn't bite immediately. Instead, He raised one massive paw and placed it on Daehyun's leg. The claws were extended, sharp enough to cut through the protective fabric. He's establishing dominance, Daehyun narrated, seeing if I'll submit or challenge him. Past Daehyun slowly, carefully, reached out and touched Razor's paw. Not pushing it away, just acknowledging it, accepting it. Razor made a deep rumbling sound, then retracted his claws. He head-bumped Daehyun's chest hard enough to push him backward slightly. That's approval, Daehyun said. He accepted me into the family structure. Shard was last, more cautious than his siblings. He circled Daehyun several times before finally approaching. When he did, he went straight for a practice pounce, hitting Daehyun in the chest with both front paws. The force knocked Daehyun flat on his back. Shard stood over him, looking down at his face. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Shard lowered his head and licked Daehyun's face once, a surprisingly gentle gesture. All three accepted you in one session, Hyuk said. That's remarkable. They were desperate for family, Daehyun said. They'd been alone too long. The following videos showed the practicing sessions developing. The cubs would stalk him, pounce on him, grab him with their claws. Sometimes they got too excited and scratched too deep, but they were learning. Each day, they controlled their strength a little better. These scratches, Daehyun pointed to his bandaged arms, are from today's session. Echo was practicing her grip technique. She's gotten much better. 2 weeks ago, the same practice would have required stitches. Jiwon reviewed the medical data. He's right. The injury severity has decreased by 70%. They're learning control. But learning isn't the same as learned, Hyuk said. One mistake could still be fatal. Life with any apex predator has risks, Daehyun said. Humans kept wolves, tamed them into dogs over thousands of years. We lived with big cats, raised bear cubs, befriended wild birds of prey. Risk is part of the relationship. Those were Earth animals, Hyuk said. These are alien predators we barely understand. They're children, Daehyun said firmly. Children who lost everything and are trying to learn how to trust again. Yes, they have claws. Yes, they're strong. But they're also scared and lonely and desperate for connection. He pulled up the most recent footage, from just this morning. It showed him sitting in the enclosure, tablet in hand, working. Echo lay beside him, her head resting on his leg. Shard played with a puzzle toy Daehyun had made. Razor napped nearby, one ear always turned toward Daehyun's location. This is a family, Daehyun said. A strange one, maybe. Different species, different worlds, but a family nonetheless. Jiwon wiped her eyes. I had no idea it went this deep. Now I understand why you keep going back despite the injuries, Hyuk said. But Daehyun, the council won't be moved by sentiment. Thorgal will demand proof they're safe around others, not just you. Then I'll prove it, Daehyun said. I'll show them that the cubs can extend their trust to other people. In 2 days? Hyuk shook his head. That's not enough time. Daehyun looked at the screen, at Echo's peaceful sleeping form. It has to be. Because the alternative is those cubs spending their lives in separate cells, alone again, thinking the universe abandoned them twice. What do you need? Jiwon asked. A volunteer, Daehyun said. Someone willing to meet the cubs and let them practice their bonding behaviors. You mean someone willing to get scratched up like you? Hyuk asked. Yes, Daehyun said simply. Jiwon took a deep breath. I'll do it. Both men stared at her. You're serious? Hyuk asked. I've seen the data. I've watched the footage. Those cubs aren't monsters, Jiwon said. And if we don't give them a chance, we're the monsters. She looked at Daehyun. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, Daehyun said. I'll need tonight to prepare them. And Jiwon? Yes? Thank you for believing in them, she smiled. Thank you for showing me they're worth believing in. The observation gallery was packed. Daehyun had never seen so many different species in one room before. Council members from 12 different worlds stood behind the reinforced viewing window, watching the Vrakath enclosure with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Thorgul stood at the center of the front row, his red eyes fixed on the cubs below. Beside him sat Counselor Nyx, a floating jellyfish being who pulsed with nervous yellow colors. On the other side was Counselor Tam, an elderly Saurian female with kind eyes. Commander Hyuk checked the security systems one final time. All cameras are recording. Medical team is standing by. Emergency barriers are functional. Jiwon stood beside Daehyun, trying to look calm. She wore simple clothes, no protective gear. Daehyun had explained that protective equipment would send the wrong message to the cubs, suggesting fear and mistrust. "You remember everything I taught you?" Daehyun asked quietly. "Yes," Jiwon said, though her hands were shaking slightly. "Keep my movements slow. Don't stare directly into their eyes for too long. Let them approach me. Don't chase them. Accept their tests without fear or aggression. And most importantly, trust them to control themselves," Jiwon finished. "Because they need to know, I believe they can." Daehyun squeezed her shoulder gently. "You'll do fine. Echo likes you already. How can you tell? She watched you through the window yesterday." Her ears were forward, curious. If she was afraid or aggressive, they'd be flat against her head. In the enclosure below, the three cubs were restless. They could sense something different was happening. The gallery full of strangers made them nervous. Razor paced back and forth. Shard kept making small, anxious chirps. Echo stayed close to her brothers, her tail swishing with uncertainty. "They look agitated," Thorgul said, his voice amplified through the speaker system. "This is already a bad sign." "They're nervous because of all the strangers watching," Daehyun responded, trying to keep his voice level. "Your species doesn't like being observed by crowds either, Counselor. My species doesn't have claws designed for killing," Thorgul replied coldly. Daehyun chose not to argue. Instead, he turned to Jiwon. "Ready?" She nodded, took a deep breath, and walked toward the enclosure entrance. Hyuk opened the door remotely, and Daehyun went through first. The cubs immediately focused on him. Echo bounded over, chirping happily. She head-bumped his leg in greeting. Razor and Shard approached more slowly, still aware of all the eyes watching from above. "Hey, family," Daehyun said softly. Kneeling down, he let Echo nuzzle his hand while Razor sniffed his hair. "We have a friend coming to visit. I need you all to be gentle, okay? Show her your good cubs. Two. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Razor made a questioning rumble. His eyes flicked to the still open door, where Jiwon waited outside. "Yes, her," Daehyun said. "Echo, you remember Jiwon? She helped fix my scratches. She's nice." Echo's ears perked up. She made a small chirp that sounded almost excited. Daehyun stood and gestured to Jiwon. She stepped through the doorway, and the door sealed behind her. The sound of it closing made all three cubs tense immediately. Razor moved between Jiwon and his siblings, his protective instincts kicking in. He didn't snarl or show teeth, but his body language was clear. He was evaluating a potential threat. "It's okay," Daehyun said to both the cubs and Jiwon. "Everyone, stay calm." Jiwon followed his instructions perfectly. She didn't look directly at Razor. Instead, she looked at the floor, making herself appear smaller by bending her knees slightly. She pulled out a small package of dried meat from her pocket, the same kind Daehyun used for treats. In the gallery, the counselors leaned forward. Even Thorgul seemed curious about what would happen next. "She's offering food," Counselor Tam said. "A traditional peace offering across many species." Jiwon placed a piece of meat on the ground in front of her, then took 3 steps backward. She knelt down, making herself even less threatening. Razor sniffed the air. His ears twitched forward. The smell of the meat was familiar. associated with good things and Daehyun. But this person was new, unknown. Long seconds passed. Daehyun stayed still, letting the cubs make their own choices. Forcing the interaction would ruin everything. Then Echo, brave Echo, took a step toward Jiwon. Razor chirped in warning, but Echo chirped back, a sound that Daehyun had learned meant, "It's okay. I know what I'm doing." Echo approached the meat slowly, cautiously. She stopped a few feet away from Jiwon and sat down, studying this new human. Jiwon kept her eyes down but spoke softly. "Hello, Echo. I'm Jiwon. I've heard a lot about you." Daehyun says, "You're very smart." Echo tilted her head, processing the gentle voice. Then she darted forward, snatched the meat, and retreated back to her brothers. She ate it quickly, then licked her lips. "First contact successful," Hyuk reported to the gallery. "No signs of aggression." "One piece of meat proves nothing," Thorgal said. "Anyone can throw food to an animal." Echo finished her treat and looked at Jiwon again. This time, there was recognition in her eyes. This person smelled like the medicine that helped Daehyun feel better. This person was connected to their family member. The small cub approached again, this time coming all the way up to Jiwon. She sniffed Jiwon's knees, her hands, working her way up to her face. "Stay still," Daehyun whispered. "Let her investigate." "Jam." "Stay still." Jiwon held perfectly still as Echo sniffed her neck, her hair. Then Echo did something unexpected. She pressed her head against Jiwon's shoulder and made a soft, rumbling purr. "Oh," Jiwon gasped softly. "Oh, hello." Carefully, slowly, Jiwon raised one hand and gently touched Echo's head. The cub leaned into the touch, purring louder. In the gallery, Counselor Nix pulsed bright green, the jellyfish equivalent of joy. "That's the Vrakith bonding gesture." The cub accepted her. Thorgal said nothing, but his jaw was tight. Seeing Echo's acceptance, Shard approached next. He was more cautious, circling Jiwon once before coming close. He sniffed her extended hand, then licked it once. His tongue was rough, but not painful. "Good boy," Jiwon said, remembering that Daehyun often praised them verbally. Shard's tail wagged slightly. He butted his head against her side, almost knocking her over. She laughed, a nervous but genuine sound, and steadied herself. That left Razor, the biggest and most protective. He still stood a few feet away, watching. He was the final test. Daehyun knew Razor needed something more. The largest cub wouldn't accept Jiwon just because his siblings did. He needed his own proof. "Razor," Daehyun said, drawing the cub's attention. "You trust me, right?" Razor looked at him and chirped affirmatively. "Then trust my judgment," Daehyun said. "Jiwon is family. She helped me when your practice scratches went too deep. She cares about us. All of us." Razor's ears swiveled, considering. Then, he walked toward Jiwon, his movements deliberate and measured. He was larger than Echo and Shard, his shoulders already reaching Jiwon's chest even on all 6 legs. He stopped right in front of her. Jiwon kept her breathing steady, though Daehyun could see her pulse racing in her neck. Razor raised one massive paw and placed it on Jiwon's shoulder. His claws were extended, just touching her skin through the fabric of her shirt. It was the same test he'd given Daehyun weeks ago. Jiwon didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. Instead, she reached up slowly and placed her hand over his paw, accepting his dominance and showing submission to the family structure. For a moment, everything was perfectly still. Then Razor retracted his claws and rumbled a deep approval. He lowered his paw and instead pressed his forehead against Jiwon's. A gesture of complete acceptance. Tears rolled down Jiwon's cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for trusting me." The gallery erupted in surprised chatter. Multiple counselors spoke at once, their various languages creating a cacophony of sound that the translation systems struggled to handle. Incredible, Counselor Tam said. I've never seen Vraketh accept a stranger so quickly, because the stranger showed proper respect, Daehyun said through the communication system. And because the cubs have learned that not all strangers are threats. This proves nothing long-term, Thorgal said, though his voice lacked some of its earlier certainty. Controlled circumstances, trained participants, careful. The alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Everyone jumped. The cubs panicked immediately, their newly calm state shattering into fear. Razor snarled. Shard backed toward the corner. Echo made a high-pitched cry of distress. What's happening? Ji-won shouted over the noise. Daehyun looked up at the gallery and saw Thorgul's hand on his personal control panel. The Korthon had triggered the emergency alert system. A stress test, Thorgal said coldly. Let's see how your safe cubs handle unexpected situations. In the enclosure, the cubs were spiraling. The loud sound triggered their trauma. Memories of the colony ship's alarms during the disaster. Shard slashed at the air, hitting nothing but lost in panic. Razor's eyes went wild, his protective instincts mixed with terror. Echo bolted toward Ji-won, not to nuzzle her, but in pure, frightened confusion. Her claws were out, her teeth bared in fear. Echo, no. Daehyun moved fast, but not fast enough. Echo crashed into Ji-won, her claws catching Ji-won's arm. Blood welled immediately. 3 parallel cuts from shoulder to elbow. Containment breach, someone in the gallery shouted. Security, deploy tranquilizers. No, Daehyun shouted. Don't shoot them. Ji-won held her bleeding arm, but her voice was firm. But the damage was done. Echo realized what she'd done and backed away, her ears flat with guilt and fear. Razor and Shard were still in panic mode, snarling at shadows. This is exactly what I warned about, Thorgal said. They're too dangerous. One loud noise, and they became violent. Cross, you created a crisis situation deliberately, Daehyun shouted at him. You sabotaged the demonstration. I tested them, Thorgal said. And they failed. Motion to transfer the cubs to isolation facility passes by emergency protocol. No, Ji-won said, standing despite her injury. You're wrong. Echo didn't attack me. She ran to me for safety and accidentally scratched me. There's a difference between an attack and an accident. Tell that to your bleeding arm, Thorgal said. Counselor Tam raised her hand. I agree with Dr. Choi. The cub's intention was clearly not hostile. However, the danger is still present. She looked at Daehyun. I'm sorry, but I must vote for extending the evaluation period. 1 more week. If you can show the cubs can handle stress without violence, we'll reconsider. Then we'll reconsider. 1 week? Daehyun repeated numbly. During which they'll be under maximum security protocols, Thorgal added. No more unsupervised contact. Daehyun looked down at the cubs. Echo was crying, a pitiful sound. Razor tried to comfort his sister while managing his own fear. Shard had retreated to the corner, shaking. All the progress. Damaged in seconds by one Korthon's cruelty. I'll prove it, Daehyun said quietly. 1 week. We'll show you these cubs can be trusted. But as he watched security prepare the tranquilizer guns just in case, he wondered if 1 week would be enough, or if Thorgal would sabotage them again. 3 days into the extended evaluation, Daehyun knew something was wrong. The cubs were acting strange. Razor snapped at the air for no reason. Shard refused to eat his morning meal. Echo, usually the most social, stayed in the corner and wouldn't come when Daehyun called. This isn't normal, Daehyun said to Ji-won, who was checking the cub's vital signs through the remote scanner. Her arm was bandaged but healing well. She'd insisted on continuing to help despite the injury. Their heart rates are elevated, Ji-won said, frowning at the data. Stress hormones are through the roof. It's like they're in constant fight or flight mode. But nothing has changed in their environment, Daehyun said. Same food, same schedule, same everything. Hyuk entered the observation room, looking troubled. We might have a problem. The night security footage from 2 days ago is corrupted. 4 hours missing, right around the time of the cub's feeding cycle. Corrupted how? Daehyun asked. Someone with high-level access wiped it, Hyuk said. Daehyun felt cold dread settle in his stomach. Check the food supply. Now. Jiwon ran a chemical analysis on the cub's most recent meal while Hyuk pulled up the feeding system logs. 10 minutes later, they had their answer. Traces of dralaxin, Jiwon said, staring at the results in disbelief. It's a mild sedative for most species. But for Vraekath neural chemistry, it acts as an aggression stimulant. Someone is drugging them, Hyuk said, making them more violent to sabotage the evaluation. Thorgul, Daehyun said immediately. This has his fingerprints all over it. We can't prove it yet, Hyuk said. But I'm pulling all the security footage from the Xenofauna wing, looking for anyone who had access to the food systems. Over the next 2 days, the situation got worse. Strange sounds echoed through the enclosure at night, keeping the cubs from sleeping properly. The temperature controls malfunctioned, making the environment too hot or too cold at random intervals. The cubs were exhausted, stressed, and their behavior showed it. Rumors spread through the station like wildfire. Daehyun heard crew members whispering that the Vraekath cubs had attacked a dozen people. None of it was true, but the lies spread faster than the truth. Public opinion is turning against them, Jiwon said sadly. I've heard people saying they should just euthanize the cubs, for everyone's safety. Number R.A. Over my dead body, Daehyun said. That's what I'm afraid of, Jiwon replied. On the 4th day, Hyuk found something. He called Daehyun and Jiwon to his office, along with another person they hadn't met before. This is Mireille Song, Hyuk said. She's a human child psychologist who works in the civilian sector of the station. Mireille was young, probably in her 30s, with sharp, observant eyes. Commander Nam asked me to review your methods with the cubs, she said to Daehyun. I have to say, I'm impressed. Everything you did matches advanced trauma therapy techniques we use with human children. The cubs are children, Daehyun said. Just different species. Exactly, Mireille agreed. But here's what concerns me. The sudden regression in their behavior. The increased aggression. The sleep disturbances. These are all signs of environmental stress or, potentially, deliberate psychological manipulation. We found evidence of tampering, Hyuk said, pulling up files on his screen. The dralaxin in their food. The corrupted security footage. But there's more. Someone has been broadcasting high-frequency sounds into the enclosure at night. Sounds specifically calibrated to cause distress in Vraekath hearing ranges. Who? Daehyun demanded. Mackley, 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 Mackley. That's the problem, Hyuk said. The access codes trace back to multiple council members' accounts. Either they're all involved, or someone is framing them, or someone with high enough clearance to use anyone's codes, Jiwon said. They all thought the same name, but Hyuk shook his head. I need more evidence before I can accuse a council member. We don't have time for more evidence, Daehyun said. The final evaluation is in 3 days. If the cubs show any aggression, they'll be transferred immediately. Then we need to find proof and fast, Hyuk said. That night, Daehyun stayed in the observation room, watching the live feed. He wouldn't let the cubs suffer another night of torture. If someone tried to activate those sounds again, he'd catch them in the act. At 0300 hours, it happened. The cubs, who had finally fallen into restless sleep, suddenly jerked awake. Razor snarled at nothing. Shard clawed at his own ears. Echo screamed. A sound of pure pain. Hyuk! Daehyun shouted into his communicator. It's happening now. Trace the signal source. He ran to the enclosure, overriding the security locks with his emergency access. The cubs were suffering, their sensitive ears damaged by sounds no human could hear. Daehyun burst into the enclosure. The cubs, lost in pain and confusion, turned toward him with wild eyes. They didn't recognize him, in their distress. "It's me," Daehyun said, trying to stay calm despite his fear. "It's family. I'm here. I'm here." Razor lunged forward, claws extended. Daehyun stood his ground. At the last second, Razor's eyes focused, recognition cutting through the pain. He veered away, slamming into the wall instead. "I know it hurts," Daehyun said, tears streaming down his face. I know. But I'm here. You're not alone." He found the sound emitter hidden in a ventilation panel. He smashed it with his boot, and the terrible noise stopped. The cubs collapsed, panting and whimpering. Daehyun sat on the floor and opened his arms. Echo crawled into his lap, trembling. Shard pressed against his side. Razor lay down with his head on Daehyun's legs. They were a pile of traumatized beings seeking comfort in each other. "I've got you," Daehyun whispered. Hyuk arrived with security teams. "We traced it," he said grimly. "The signal came from Thorgul's personal quarters." "Finally," Daehyun said. "Now you can arrest him." "There's more," Hyuk said. "We did deep background research. Thorgul's species, the Korthan, were at war with the Vraketh 20 years ago, the plague that wiped out most of the Vraketh population. Some historians think it wasn't natural. They think it was a biological weapon." "You're saying Thorgul's people committed genocide?" Ji-won asked, horrified. "I'm saying there's bad history there," Hyuk said. "Thorgul lost family in that war. He sees these cubs not as children, but as future weapons of a species that killed his brother. So he's been sabotaging them from the start," Daehyun said, "making them seem dangerous so they'll be locked away forever. Or worse," Mireille said quietly, "if they're deemed too dangerous. Station protocol allows for termination of hazardous specimens." The word hung in the air like poison. Termination. They were talking about killing 3 orphaned children because one bitter man couldn't see past his prejudice. "We need to move fast," Hyuk said. "I have enough evidence to bring charges against Thorgul. But he's a council member. The legal process takes time. The final evaluation is in 2 days. What if he tries something during the evaluation itself?" Ji-won asked. "He will," Daehyun said with certainty. "He's failed to make them aggressive enough through subtle means. He'll try something more dramatic. 10, 2, 2. Then we'll be ready," Hyuk said. "I'm posting extra security. I'll personally monitor all systems during the evaluation." "It won't be enough," Mireille said. "If Thorgul is desperate, he'll find a way. Men driven by hate and grief are unpredictable." Daehyun looked down at the cubs sleeping peacefully now, finally at rest after so much suffering. Echo's paw twitched in her sleep, chasing dream prey through safe imaginary forests. "Then we make sure the evaluation happens on our terms," Daehyun said. "Not his." Daehyun. "What do you mean?" Hyuk asked. "The final evaluation is supposed to be in the enclosure, with council members observing from the gallery," Daehyun said. "That gives Thorgul access to all the environmental controls, the alarm systems, everything. So where else can we do it?" Ji-won asked. Daehyun thought for a moment. "The community garden. Open space. Natural environment. Plenty of witnesses. If Thorgul tries something there, everyone will see." "You want to take 3 apex predator cubs into a public space?" Hyuk looked skeptical. "I want to show everyone that these cubs can exist peacefully around other beings," Daehyun said. "No barriers. No weapons. No tricks. Just 3 cubs, and the families who care about them. The council will never approve it." Mireille said. "Then we don't ask for approval," Daehyun said. We invoke citizen petition rights. If enough station residents sign a petition, the council has to honor a public demonstration. That's risky, Hugh said. If anything goes wrong, the cubs will be terminated immediately. And if we do nothing, they'll be shipped to isolation cells, where they'll die slowly of loneliness and heartbreak. Daehyun countered. At least this way, they have a chance. Jiwon put her hand on Daehyun's shoulder. Then, let's get those signatures. We have 2 days to convince this station that these cubs deserve life. I'll help, Mireille said. I have contacts in the civilian sectors. Parents with children might understand what you're trying to do. I'll make sure security is airtight, Hugh said. And I'll have evidence ready to present against Thorgal the moment he makes his move. They worked through the night, planning every detail. By morning, they had a strategy. Now they just needed to execute it before Thorgal realized what they were doing. Daehyun looked at the cubs one more time before leaving the observation room. They were curled together, a pile of purple and silver fur, breathing in peaceful synchronization. 2 more days, he promised them. Hold on for 2 more days, and I'll show them all what you really are. Not monsters, not weapons, just children who deserve a chance to grow up loved. Echo's ear twitched in her sleep, and Daehyun chose to believe she heard him. He chose to believe they would all make it through this. He had to believe, because hope was the only weapon he had left. The community garden was full of people. Daehyun had never seen it so crowded. Humans, Saurians, Paxians, Andorians, and dozens of other species stood among the plants and trees, all waiting to witness what many thought would be a disaster. The petition had gathered 2,000 signatures in just 36 hours. Mireille and Jiwon had worked tirelessly, telling the cubs' story to anyone who would listen. Parents with young children were the most receptive. They understood what it meant to nurture instead of fear. The station council stood at the front of the crowd, required by law to attend any citizen-requested public demonstration. Thorgal's face was a mask of barely controlled anger. He knew he'd been outmaneuvered, forced into a situation he couldn't control. Commander Hugh had security teams stationed at every entrance, though they were instructed to remain invisible. The atmosphere needed to feel safe, not militarized. Are you sure about this? Jiwon asked Daehyun one more time. No, Daehyun admitted. But I'm sure about them. He looked toward the transport carrier where the cubs waited. They're ready. They've been practicing with me for days. Practicing what? Mirai asked. She'd spent the past 2 days working with Daehyun, understanding Vrakith psychology and body language. Being gentle, Daehyun said simply. I've taught them that soft touches get rewards, that controlled strength makes me happy. They understand more than most people think. Counselor Tam approached them, her aged Saurian face kind but concerned. This is very brave, Dr. Park. But I must ask if something goes wrong. What then? Then I take full responsibility. Daehyun said. The cubs will not be blamed for my failures. That's not what I'm worried about, Tam said gently. I'm worried those cubs will lose the only person who ever believed in them. That's why it has to work, Daehyun said. Thorgal's voice boomed across the garden. Enough delays. Begin this demonstration, so we can end this foolishness. Daehyun nodded to Hyuk, who opened the transport carrier remotely. The door slid open, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then Echo stepped out first, as always the bravest. She looked around at the crowd, her ears swiveling to catch every sound. So many people. So many different smells. She made a nervous chirping sound. Daehyun knelt down and held out his hand. Echo bounded to him, pressing her head against his chest. Shard emerged next, more cautious. He stayed close to the carrier's entrance, assessing the situation. Razor came last, positioning himself protectively in front of his siblings. The crowd murmured. Some people stepped back. Others leaned forward. Curious. Look how big they've gotten, someone whispered. Those claws could tear through steel, another voice said nervously. But they're not tearing anything, a third person countered. Look, they're staying with the human. Daehyun stood slowly. Come on. Family. Let's show everyone how good you are. He walked toward the center of the garden where a small, open space had been cleared. The cubs followed, staying within a few feet of him. Their body language showed nervousness, but not aggression. Ears forward. Tails relaxed. Movements controlled. Mireille stepped forward, as planned. She was the first test someone the cubs had never met before. She carried a basket of treats, the kind the cubs loved. Hello, Razor, Shard. Echo, she said calmly. My name is Mireille. I've heard wonderful things about you. Razor rumbled deep in his chest, a questioning sound. Daehyun put his hand on the big cub's shoulder. She's safe. She's family. Show her your gentle greeting. Razor approached Mireille slowly. He sniffed her extended hand, then very carefully, very deliberately, he head-bumped her palm. Not hard enough to hurt, just enough to make contact. The crowd gasped. Several people started recording on their personal devices. Well done, Razor, Mireille said, offering him a treat. You're very gentle. Echo and Shard approached next, less cautious now that their brother had deemed Mireille safe. They took treats from her hands. Their movements soft and controlled. This is impossible, someone in the crowd said. Abused Vraketh don't, Daehyun said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Traumatized Vraketh don't. But these cubs have been shown love and patience. They've learned trust. They've learned that the world can be kind. A Paxian woman with 2 small cubs of her own species stepped forward. May I approach? Slowly, Daehyun said. Let them come to you. The woman knelt down, her own cubs peeking out from behind her fur. She approached cautiously, curious about these small, fluffy creatures. The Paxian cubs made soft squeaking sounds. Echo tilted her head, listening. Then she lowered herself down to their height, making herself less intimidating. She's being gentle with my babies, the Paxian mother said, wonder in her voice. She knows they're young. One of the Paxian cubs reached out a tiny paw and touched Echo's nose. Echo went perfectly still, letting the baby explore. When the cub patted her face, Echo made a soft, rumbling purr. The crowd's mood shifted. People weren't backing away anymore. They were moving closer, fascinated. This is a trick, Thorgal said loudly. The human has them drugged. This isn't natural behavior. Then, test them, Daehyun challenged. Medical scan. Right now. Prove they're drugged. Ji-won stepped forward with a portable scanner. She ran it over each cub while everyone watched. Results are clean. No drugs, no sedatives, no chemical alterations of any kind. This is their natural behavior when they feel safe. Thorgal's face darkened with rage. Then we should test their response to stress. See what happens when they're threatened. No, Counselor Tam said firmly. We've seen that trick before, Thorgal. You deliberately triggered alarms to cause panic. We won't allow it again. Are you accusing me of— Yes, Hyuk interrupted, stepping forward. We're accusing you, officially. We have evidence that you sabotaged the cubs' rehabilitation, drugged their food, broadcast painful frequencies into their enclosure, corrupted security footage, all to make them appear dangerous. The crowd erupted in angry voices. Other council members looked shocked. These are lies, Thorgal snarled. These are documented facts, Hyuk said, holding up a datapad. Everything is recorded and verified. You've been manipulating this evaluation from the beginning. Why? Counselor Tam demanded. Why would you do this? Because they're Vraketh. Thorgal's composure finally cracked. Because their species killed my brother. Because they don't deserve mercy or second chances. They deserve extinction. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the cubs seemed to sense the tension, pressing closer to Daehyun. Your brother died in a war 20 years ago, Tam said quietly. These cubs weren't even born yet. You're punishing children for things they never did. They'll grow into weapons, Thorgul said. All Vraketh do. It's in their nature. No, a new voice said. A human man stepped forward from the crowd. It's in how they're raised. More humans began stepping forward, forming a loose circle around Daehyun and the cubs. I was a violent child, one woman said. Hurt people without meaning to. Therapy and love taught me control. My son has behavioral issues, a man added. But with patience and proper support, he's learning. These cubs deserve the same chance. Our species has raised wolves into dogs, another human said. Tamed wild cats into pets. Befriended creatures that could kill us. We don't fear something just because it's powerful. We offer it a reason to choose. Gentleness. More voices joined in, humans sharing stories of rehabilitation, adoption, and second chances. The other species watched, many seeming confused by this very human perspective. You're all fools, Thorgul said, letting sentiment cloud judgment. No, Daehyun said firmly. We're letting compassion guide wisdom. There's a difference. A small human girl, maybe 6 years old, slipped through the crowd. Before anyone could stop her, she ran up to Shard and threw her arms around his neck. The crowd gasped. Jiwon moved to intervene, but Daehyun held up his hand, stopping her. Shard froze, surprised by the sudden contact. The little girl looked up at him with complete trust. You're pretty, she said. Can I pet you? Shard looked at Daehyun, uncertain what to do. Daehyun nodded slightly. Very carefully, Shard lowered his head and let the girl stroke his fur. His tail wagged slowly, gently, showing happiness without the force that could hurt her. She's 5 years old, the girl's father said, rushing over but stopping when he saw his daughter was safe. She loves animals, all animals. Your daughter sees what I see, Daehyun said. Not monsters. Not weapons. Just creatures capable of gentleness, when taught with love. The girl giggled as Shard licked her hand softly. He's nice, Daddy. Can we get one? Despite the tension, several people laughed. The sound was warm. Accepting, Counselor Tam stepped into the center of the space. I've seen enough. I move that the Vraketh cubs be granted permanent protective status under human guardianship. Let Earth and her people take responsibility for their rehabilitation. Seconded, said Counselor Nix, pulsing bright green. All in favor? Tam called. 8 of the 12 council members raised their hands or equivalent gestures. Thorgul and 3 others abstained. But it didn't matter. The motion passed. The cubs will be transported to Earth, Tam declared, to a specialized facility where Dr. Park and his team will continue their work. This station officially recognizes the Vraketh cubs as juveniles, under protection, not threats to be contained. The crowd erupted in cheers. The little girl hugged Shard tighter. Echo danced in excited circles. Razorhead bumped Daehyun so hard, he nearly fell over. Thorgul stared at them all with bitter hatred. You'll regret this. When they grow up and show their true nature, then we'll handle it with the same compassion we've shown now, Daehyun said. But I don't think that will happen. These cubs have learned love. They'll teach it to others. Security escorted Thorgul away to face charges. The crowd began to disperse, many people stopping to carefully pet the cubs or thank Daehyun for his work. Mireille approached with tears in her eyes. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, Daehyun corrected. All of us together. Jiwon checked her tablet. There's already interest from other stations. 3 different species have orphaned juveniles they want to send to your program. Good, Daehyun said, watching Echo play gently with a group of Paxian cubs. There are so many young ones who need help. Who need someone to believe in them? When do we leave for Earth? Mireille asked. 3 days, Daehyun said. Just enough time to prepare the cubs for the journey. That night, Daehyun sat in the enclosure one last time on Station Kepler 7. The cubs piled around him, peaceful and content. He ran his hands through their fur, feeling the steady rhythm of their breathing. "You did so well today," he told them softly. "I'm so proud of all three of you. You showed everyone what I always knew, that you're not defined by fear or pain. You're defined by the choices you make and the love you accept." Echo purred, half asleep. Shard's tail thumped lazily against the floor. Razor kept one eye open, always protective, but relaxed. 5 years later, Dae-hyun stood in a different enclosure on Earth. The Interspecies Juvenile Rehabilitation Center had grown beyond his wildest dreams. Dozens of species sent their orphaned young here now. The facility sprawled across 100 acres of natural habitat. Razor, Shard, and Echo were fully grown now, magnificent and powerful. But they were gentle too, working alongside Dae-hyun and his team to help new arrivals adjust. A transport ship arrived carrying 3 young Korthan cubs, orphaned in a mining accident. The other staff members were nervous. Korthan were aggressive by nature, militaristic, and proud, but Dae-hyun greeted them with the same patience he'd shown the Vracath cubs years ago. And Echo, remembering what it felt like to be scared and alone, approached the Korthan cubs with soft chirps of welcome. "We're family here," Dae-hyun said, in perfect Korthan language now. "All species, all backgrounds. We don't judge you by what you might become. We help you become who you choose to be." The smallest Korthan cub, barely bigger than a human child, looked up at him with suspicious eyes. "Are you going to hurt us?" the cub asked. "Never," Dae-hyun promised. "I'm here to teach you that the universe can be kind, that strength and gentleness can exist together, that being powerful doesn't mean you have to be feared." Razor laid down beside the Korthan cubs, his massive Vracath body a wall of protection. Years ago, his species and theirs were enemies. Now, they would learn to be family. Ji-won, now the director of medical services, watched from the observation deck. Mireille, head of psychological services, stood beside her. "Do you ever worry?" Mireille asked. "That one day, something will go wrong? That one of them will hurt someone?" "Every day," Ji-won admitted. "But then I remember what Dae-hyun taught us, that the bravest thing we can do is offer trust. That second chances aren't given because there's no risk, they're given despite the risk. Because that's what love means." Thanks for watching. The well he provided it. Below, Echo was teaching the Korthan cubs how to play practice, showing them how to control their strength. Shard demonstrated the head bump greeting that meant acceptance. Razor rumbled soft encouragement when the cubs got scared, and Dae-hyun sat among them all, covered in old scars that he wore like medals of honor. Each scratch, each mark, a reminder that trust is earned through patience. That family isn't defined by species or origin. A young human intern approached him nervously. "Dr. Park? The new Andrelian cubs just arrived. They're pretty aggressive. The transport crew said they're impossible to work with." Dae-hyun smiled, that same gentle smile he'd given Echo 5 years ago. "They all are. At first." He stood and brushed off his clothes. "Come on, let's go teach them that impossible is just another word for haven't tried yet." As he walked toward the new arrivals, trailed by 3 full-grown Vracath who had once been called monsters, Dae-hyun thought about that first day on Station Kepler 7, when security asked why he was covered in scratches. "The cubs were practicing," he'd said. But the truth was deeper. They weren't just practicing hunting techniques or social bonds. They were practicing trust, practicing hope, practicing the hardest skill of all learning to believe that someone cared enough to let you hurt them and still come back. That was the real human superpower. Not pack bonding, though that was part of it. The real power was the stubborn, illogical, beautiful refusal to give up on someone just because they had claws. Humans looked at creatures with fangs and saw friends waiting to happen. Looked at scales and fur and chitin and thought family. Saw aggression and recognized fear underneath. saw danger, and chose compassion anyway. It was stupid, really. Dangerous. Illogical by any rational measure. But it was also magnificent. And as Daehyun approached the new Andrelian cubs six-legged, covered in spikes, hissing with terror and trauma, he simply sat down, pulled out his lunch, and began to eat. He had time. He always had time. Because that's what humans did. They sat with the broken things of the universe and whispered, "You're not alone anymore. I'll wait as long as it takes. Practice on me. Learn with me. Heal with me. I'm getting too old for this," Daehyun muttered, as one of the Andrelian cubs made a threatening display. Echo head-bumped his shoulder gently, her way of saying she'd help. Daehyun smiled and scratched behind her ears. "Okay. One more time. Let's teach them what family means." Behind him, Earth's sun set over the rehabilitation center. Dozens of species that the galaxy had called dangerous played together in the evening light. Cubs who had known only fear now knew only love. And somewhere, on distant station Kepler 7, a report was filed in the galactic database. Species, human, threat level, minimal. Special note: will attempt to befriend anything. Approach with caution, they will try to adopt you. Recommendation: do not underestimate their capacity for compassion. It is their most dangerous and wonderful weapon. The cubs said they were practicing, but really, the whole galaxy was learning. Learning that sometimes the scariest thing in the universe isn't the creature with claws and fangs. It's the creature who looks at claws and fangs and says, "Come here. Let me show you how to be gentle." That's humanity. And yeah, fuck yeah,